We're back, baby. Second core, keep it rolling. New intro, love the color palette. New outro, don't look at it too close if you haven't read the books. Episode 14 of Dungeon Meshi lays a ton of groundwork, introduces a whole set of new characters, and launches the series into a new era where Laios and his party's escapades will have to come up against the ever-expanding web of conflicting interests that make up this world. So let's break down the animation and storytelling and see what changes have been made from the source material. It was directed by Shinya Kawabe with storyboards by Hisatoshi Shimizu, and adapts chapters 31 and 32, as well as the first page of chapter 33, out of order. After a very direct rendition by Hideyuki Satake of this hilarious panel of the boys having a bonding moment while Marcel still lies traumatized and immobilized on the floor in the foreground, things get all wacky, wild, and goofy silly because every time this bastard shows up, he seems to want to shuffle around the structure of the story. So we jump from the first panel of chapter 33 back to the start of 31. And a side note, in some unofficial English releases, chapter 33 actually came first, making it chapter 31, which I don't understand. I hadn't started reading it yet at the time, though I will say that that order kinda works too. Chapter 33 serves as a welcome return to the full-on slapstick comedy tone, nestled between Fallen's transformation and disappearance and Kabru's alarming moralistic crusade. But we'll have to wait one more week for this iconic panel. Well, there's your sneak peek to hold you over until then. Kabru and his friends wake up from yet another crushing defeat, wondering why the hell those freaks would steal just their barley and not their money, and some people were speculating that this scene, which was cut from episode 7, would be adapted here instead, but no, it's just this for freeze frame recap. So I guess you'll just have to go back and watch that video after this one if you haven't seen it, because I go over what made that scene significant in the first place. Or I guess you could just read it also. It's in the first half of chapter 15. A lot of this is pretty basic dialogue stuff, so the first bit of animation that stood out to me was this cut of Mickbell discovering that all their food is gone. Following a few minutes of still frames and simple mouth movements, it's fitting that the first real bit of animation is an emotional outburst about food. There are 3 frames of big anticipation where his whole body bunches up and compresses downward like a spring about to explode. The hands fling upward in what could be read in a way as even more anticipation. Then his head and shoulders lead the downward smash motion, with the hands following behind, and finally the empty bag follows the arc of the hands. This part is animated on ones, making it feel fast and smooth compared to the rest of the scene. He starts moving upward the moment the bag hits the ground as if he's a little bouncy ball, and it goes back to 2s once he's in the air. This is a really cool few cuts. We're back in the lake biome, and they will not miss an opportunity to use that wacky lighting to their advantage. The underlighting from the mana-infused water allows for some great volumetric detail in the body of this fake fishman, and with each swing of the axe or Kabru's sword, there's a big jump between frames at the moment of impact, which makes the strike feel faster and more punchy. Kabru has seemed pretty weak up until this point, having gotten overwhelmed by monsters twice, with a party almost twice the size of Laios's, but it turns out that fighting other humans is where he's really in his element. And there's that blue-eye stare again. These 2 panels feel like they're designed specifically with moving images in mind, even almost matching the 16:9 aspect ratio. They're essentially storyboards already, so it's no surprise that this shot works really well on screen. And I especially like the choice here to have him pull back on the trident a bit in order to use it to slingshot his body forward and get moving a little bit faster. I mentioned when Kabru first showed up that he's the perfect foil to Laios, and that's even more clear now, even down to the way they move, with Laios's lumbering, goofy run cycles and Kabru's surprising show of agility here. While Laios wears his heart on his sleeve, gives an off-putting first impression, loves monsters, and uses his encyclopedic knowledge of them to overcome challenges that should have been impossible, but struggles to understand people, Kabru has a friendly and approachable outward demeanor that conceals something dirtier and meaner. He's a master at understanding and manipulating people for his own motives. He even talks about it with the same enthusiasm that Laios does about his own interests. He doesn't seem to understand monsters very well and struggles to defeat them, but turns into a killing machine when it comes to other humans. In fact, if it weren't for this new party showing up at the end of the episode, they surely would have smashed the world record time for getting back-to-back squad wiped. It turns out he's totally fine with straight up murdering a few people as long as he deems them to be immoral and acting without the greater good in mind. And I love his justification that stealing their money is what would make them just as bad as this group of conmen, not the fact that he murdered them and tossed their corpses into the lake, clearly intending for them not to to get resurrected. You can tell that his actions are governed by his own strict moral code. It's not the killing that's wrong, it's doing it for personal gain, even if they would have been revived back in town. And any action, including murder, in service of the ultimate moral goal of destroying the dungeon is ultimately justified. Laios is gradually learning about his place in the dungeon, but he generally just does whatever he thinks is right and or cool and fun in the moment. This shot of the adventurer's rations by Akika Mizuno is similar to the food shots that we've become accustomed to, but with a couple key differences. Notice how, particularly in the meat, the illustration style is the same, but it's missing the deep saturated reds and the bright white shine and bloom effects that make Senshi's cooking glisten the way it does. This looks okay, but despite being a high quality meal set, it's missing the same sense of freshness that comes from real dungeon to table cuisine. Also, the score is different. As the lore within the dungeon grows deeper with the main party, the lore outside the dungeon grows outward with Kabru and his party. There seems to be a life cycle to dungeons and the populations that surround them, and this lot seem to know, or at least think they know, what to expect. He pays him in Scooby snacks? No wonder he hates Chilchuck for being a union man. Dogmen deserve workers' rights too. Here are two more panels that mirror those earlier ones and lean into that cinematic quality. This almost feels like something Tatsuki Fujimoto would draw. I love this goofy-ass walk cycle that really shows Mick's personality as a smug little bastard, and the extreme stretching here when he gets startled reflects the same snappy, frantic energy that Chilchuck has and seems to be a characteristic of Half-Foot's. This cut of the sea serpent is actually animated on 4s, which is lower than they tend to go in action scenes, and there's an argument to be made that it gives a slow motion feeling that emphasizes its size, especially since the blade fish around it are all animated on 2s, but contrasted with the full 24 frames per second of the background, it kinda ends up feeling like a slideshow. And I'm inclined to think that it was done to save energy rather than for a stylistic choice, especially compared to this very similar shot from episode 7. Let me know what you think in the comments. This is a great cut with the fully animated background which lets you know that shit's about to go down, but it's the composition that really does wonders for this shot. In fact, I wish I knew who did this cut, but Studio Trigger made some strange decisions with which keyframes to release this week, showing almost exclusively shots that were just still frames in the final episode. I guess still frames make for nicer and more detailed images than frames taken from actual animation, but come on. There's a lot going on here between the sea serpent hurtling through the air, this wave rolling over the camera, and Shuro in the background zipping towards us. But it's all organized in a way that draws your eyes right to Shuro. The serpent literally forms an arrow pointing in his direction, the wave frames him while blocking out most of the rest of the frame, and even the perspective lines in the ruins that surround him point towards him. And finally, oh, is he doing okay? And finally, this katana slash draws an arc right from his position in this shot to his position in this one. This is the most anime thing I've seen in this show so far. I love how Kabru and Shuro both seem like they should be the main character in their own ways, but in this world the qualities that would normally make you the main character are actually often detrimental. What could Kuro possibly be so mad about? And finally, we wrap back around to the next 4 panels of chapter 33 just to make sure you remember who this show is about. Well, there you have it. A bit of a shorter one, partially because this was a dialogue-heavy episode with pretty economical production and less animation to break down, and partially because I have some other stuff to work on this week. But this one laid a ton of groundwork and dropped a ton of new characters and information, so keep the discussion going in the comments, and I'll see you here same time next week. And consider subscribing if you want to catch the next one of these videos. Thanks for watching.